On today's episode of What's Going On with Shipping, we discuss the grounding of a ferry in New Zealand. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So while I was at the Kiel International Sea Power Symposium, I received many notes from our international audience. What's Going On with Shipping is a huge audience, particularly a large one down in New Zealand. And the New Zealand ferry Aratere ran aground after departing the southern island heading to Wellington on the North Island. We're going to take a look at that incident, what happened. We're going to talk about the salvage of the vessel. We're going to talk about the background of New Zealand ferries and the condition they're in. This is a crucial issue that I think isn't just in New Zealand, it's across the world, and how sea blindness has really impacted many nations, with the perfect example being New Zealand, a island nation, two large islands out in the southern Pacific, absolutely dependent on shipping, and yet they really don't seem to have a coherent maritime strategy. Their navy is woefully understaffed, undermanned at this point, and this issue I think is really symbolic of issues that nations like New Zealand and many others, not just New Zealand, but other nations face. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. So here's a story over at Maritime Executive. New Zealand inter-island ferry goes hard aground in latest incident. The Ro-Ro ferry Aratere, I hope I'm saying that right. I watched many videos on this and I tried to get the pronunciation exact. Ran hard aground departing Picton on New Zealand's South Island for its 4-hour run across Cook Strait. Cook Strait is that barrier between the North and South Island. It's the latest embarrassment for the inter-island service operated by Kiwirail. Kiwirail operates 3 large ferries, but Aratere is the only one that actually carries rail cars. The company acknowledged a steering failure on the 25-year-old vessel. The ship's 18,000 gross tons departed Picton earlier than scheduled for its 4th and final run of the day. It started the day with a scheduled 05:30 departure from Wellington on the North Island, followed by 1100 on Picton, 1630 from Wellington. The company reported the vessel, which carries rail cars and trucks, was making a freight-only run, had been due to reach the North Island around 0200. At around 21:45 tonight, about a half hour after departing the berth, the Aratere veered off course and became stuck approximately 1.5 nautical miles north of Picton in Tikoa Bay. I'm not sure how to say that. I apologize. The vessel had 39 crew members on board, plus there were 8 commercial drivers on board for the trucks. So here's Aratere in better days. She's a beautiful ship, again, built back in 1998. Very common in Asia, Europe, many other places outside the United States to see large ferries like this that are combination car, in this case rail, but also with accommodations on board for the voyages so that you can hang out in lounges, you can get rooms for beds. There's a whole variety of different elements. When I was up in Germany, you saw every day come into Kiel, for example, ferries coming from Sweden and Norway and other countries in and around the area. So fairly typical. This is Aratere in not great days. This is her aground and mightily aground. You can see the bulbous bow out of the water. You can see the bow thrusters, 2 bow thrusters up. The ship lost power and immediately careened hard right into the water, into the land. Head on over to MarineTraffic, looking at the data we have. So Aratere, Ro-Ro passenger ship, built in 1998, sails under the New Zealand flag. Since it operates in the coastal waters in and around New Zealand flag, it is registered with that. Has a reported draft of 5.6 meters, overall length 183.69 meters, width of 20.5 meters, and 17,816 gross tons. This is the track line for Aratere over the past 30 days, and you can see ferries run pretty set courses. I mean, back in the day, these course lines are on a chart in pen because you're never changing. This is that connection I was talking about between New Zealand, the North Island, the South Island, and this is the closest connection point right here across the Cook Strait, named for Captain James Cook. And again, it connects Picton here on the South Island over with Wellington on the North Island. Let's take a look at what happened on the night in question. This is a track of Aratere leaving North Island, heading to South Island. 21 June, roughly around 0600 UTC time. Local time is 12 hours ahead in New Zealand. And here you see the vessel coming in. I'm going to remove the route overlays here, and you'll see the ship coming into the region. So this is roughly around 2100 hours local time, just over 0900 UTC time, 12-hour difference between New Zealand and standard time. Here you see Aratere at the pier in Picton. You can see her now beginning her departure out. I'm going to pause this for a second. She does not run very far when this accident takes place. Heading out at about 9 knots, she'll accelerate here to about 12.5 knots. And this is where you'll see all of a sudden the turn begin to take place. The ship loses steering and veers hard to the right. And what we see here is the vessel come ashore very quickly right into the headland. So this is 0830 UTC time on 22 June, 12 hours ahead, as I mentioned to you before, makes it 2000 hours, 8 p.m. in the region. Twin tugs fixed to the stern there, and you'll see the movement of Aratere off the shoal area, off land, and moved out to sea here. Here's the movement, gradual movement being pulled off as she comes free. They're going ahead and maneuver her into the area, out into open water. Here's the present position of Aratere out in the anchorage outside of the port, clear of the dock, while damage is being assessed on the vessel. So I pulled up some data on Kiwi ferries. This is their Interislander. The ferries, they have 3 of them. They can carry up to 1,400 passengers, while Aratere has a capacity for 600. Between the 3 of them, they move nearly 800,000 passengers and 250,000 cars a year. So these 3 ferries are absolutely essential for the nation of New Zealand. Timelines, they run on a fairly standard schedule. One of the things I noted here is, besides having 6 return sailings a day between Wellington and Picton, you'll notice this, a minor change to Aratere timetable from Monday 27 May to approximately 29 July, due as we are waiting for a gearbox part to be delivered. The sailing will take around 4 hours and 30 minutes. So obviously Aratere was having an engine issue, and that was slowing down its normal route. If it's taking 4 hours and 30 minutes, that's telling you there's some mechanical issues. And a ship that's over almost 30 years old is going to be a problem for getting parts. So I want to bring this up. This is from Simon Brown. He is a member of Parliament, but also the Minister of Transport, Local Government and Energy for Auckland. And he has been very vocal about this issue in New Zealand. And he posted this the other day on Twitter. I've flown to Wellington this morning to be briefed by officials on the Aratere, Kiwirail, and the Minister of Transport and Maritime New Zealand are updating me. It goes on here with updates. There were several investigations into this incident to confirm what has gone wrong and how we ensure this does not happen again. Ministers have made clear their expectations that Kiwirail must take all steps necessary to maintain the safety and reliability of its existing ferries. We note that, as well as the significant cost blowouts, a previous proposal for replacement ferries would not have seen ships arrive until at least 2026. And due to their much larger size, questions remain about whether those ships would have been safe to sail the Tory Channel. The government is working with an expert ministerial advisory group, because that never can go wrong, who are recommending options for replacing the ferries. The work is progressing with urgency, and ministers will take recommendations to cabinet. The government has ensured funding is available to purchase new ships. New Zealand has a population of about 5.2 million people. 3/4 of those live on the North Island, the other quarter on the South Island, and some smaller islands in and around. So obviously the ferry connecting the 2 islands, the North and South Island, are essential for them. But understand, New Zealand isn't alone in this issue of replacement ferries. The ferries are used on a consistent basis. Again, you look at that schedule, those ships are running nearly continually. So they need to be dependable, which means they're going to get a lot of wear and tear. And after a set period of time, you have got to replace them, or else the maintenance cost and the downtime becomes a major problem, because we're seeing that in another area of the world right now. This is a story out of the state of Washington, where the Washington ferry system is suffering many of the same problems. There are issues about replacements for an aging fleet. And in the United States, there is a requirement, because ferries operate between U.S. ports and carry U.S. cargo and U.S. personnel, they have to be U.S. built. And so there is a big problem in the United States with the replacement costs and the program to get ferries built in the United States for the state of Washington. New Zealand can go outside. They do not have a cabotage law that restricts them. However, they do have to spend that money and make that investment to get the new replacement vessels. At the same time, New Zealand has been suffering from issues of overdependence on outside shipping. This is a story from 2022 about Maersk launching a dedicated coastal service in and around New Zealand. They identified two vessels, the Maersk Nandi and the Maersk Nanshan, that's going to work on what's called the Maersk Coastal Connect, a dedicated service moving cargo between ports on the North and South Island. This didn't even last a year because in March of 2023, as part of the upgrade into what they call their Polaris service, the Maersk Coastal Connect service will be phased out by April of 2023. So you basically got a year out of this. And again, I go to the issue of sea blindness, not just in the United States and New Zealand, but globally. When I head back over here to MarineTraffic, one of the things that MarineTraffic allows you to do is really sort through data. So what I've done here is program in all the ships that are departing from New Zealand, and you can see where ships leaving New Zealand are heading. They're heading to the Panama Canal, got a vessel heading up to the United States, some heading over to South America, a lot over to Australia, but more importantly, a lot heading into Asia. And if you flip this data, these are ships sailing to New Zealand, you see very much the same. Ships coming from Panama Canal, one coming from the United States, a lot coming from Asia, and then of course in and around the region you can see ships moving between the islands of New Zealand. So New Zealand is extremely dependent on this coastal trade. And when you get stories like the Aratere's grounding, it's really a warning call. It's a warning call for issues. And if you go back and look at the history of this vessel, there's been problems. This is from a follow-up story over at Maritime Executive. The Aratere has a long history of breakdowns, beginning with her delivery voyage and running up through the present day. Like the rest of the Kiwirail three-ship fleet, Aratere is nearing the end of her useful life. The firm had been trying to replace the vessel since 2021, but had difficulties in gaining consistent government support for the procurement. In the meantime, the firm's current vessels continue to operate across the Cook Strait. Maritime New Zealand's enforcement arm is currently prosecuting Kiwirail, that's the owner of the vessel, over a previous technical breakdown. The Keitaki, another of the Kiwirail's vessels, lost power in 2023 near Wellington with a load of cargo and passengers on board and drifted towards the rocks at Sinclair Head. Luckily, the crew managed to drop the anchor. The root cause was a failed rubber expansion joint in one of the cooling lines. A post-accident investigation determined the component had been manufactured in 2005 and had been installed after being in storage for 13 years. At the time of its failure in 2023, it was 18 years old, long past the OEM's rated timeline for replacement. Two other expansion joints were also past dates, suggesting a pattern of installing aged equipment from the warehouse. Goes on in an interview with the New Zealand Herald, the transport minister, who we talked about just a minute ago, Simon Brown, called the grounding incredibly concerning and deeply disappointing in the maintenance of Kiwirail. It goes on, the government is committed to making the investment required to support resilient shipping across the strait, including new ships. But we also have to get the right ships for the job, and Kiwirail must maintain its existing ships to the safe standard required. Newly appointed Finance Minister Nicola Willis canceled Kiwirail's new build fleet replacement last December for budgetary reasons, calling the New Zealand dollars $3 billion acquisition plan a Ferrari option. Contracts were already in place and design work was underway at the time of the cancellation. The new vessels would have been delivered in 2026. So again, a lot of times people don't understand shipping and what it takes to get good shipping. Obviously, New Zealand Kiwirail was in the process of getting 3 new ships, but now they're going to have to start all over again. And that means any replacement's not going to be 2026, but you're looking at probably towards the end of the decade by the time you get it in, because now what you're looking at is markets being very tight for getting ships built. Capacity is not in the shipyards. You're going to have to go to South Korea, Japan, or China to get these built, and you're going to have to keep the 3 ships that are currently running in service up and running, which means more maintenance costs and potentially more downings and issues. You've had 2 close calls here. one last year and now one this year. This should highlight to New Zealand the need for safe and efficient replacement ships for this. It goes the same thing for the state of Washington, and it goes the same across the world. We don't spend enough time, money, and investment in our maritime infrastructures. And we're seeing that manifest themselves with the Dolly in Baltimore, the issue here in New Zealand, and a myriad of other incidents that you can all see right here on what's going on with shipping. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? You hit that super thanks button down below, or head on over to Patreon and become a monthly or yearly subscriber. Big shout out to everyone down in New Zealand. I'm happy to come down there and report on this live. I've been wanting to get to New Zealand. I have been a merchant mariner for many years. I always say I've been to 6 of 7 continents. Where I have not been, the one that eludes me is Australia and New Zealand, and I'm going to get there yet. Until our next episode, this is Sal, signing off.